Actually turn your sound off so things don't get interrupted. And I will start. If you have any questions, I'm going to ask if you would please put them in the chat. I'll go through them, and if they're appropriate at that moment in time.
Nancy, you and Don are going to have to unmute.
Great. All right. Did anybody hear anything that I just said, or should I start over?
So the only thing I'll add, Nancy, is questions are fair game. So get those to Nancy, Rich, whoever's moderating, and I'll be glad to focus on those. That's part of it. If, what's the worst case scenario? We get into a good discussion on a topic and there's a few slides we don't hit. It doesn't matter. There's always another day. So it's all good.
Okay. Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
All right. So that's Don, and he is an award-winning, internationally recognized photographer. He's native Florida, and he's living currently in Boca Raton. He's passionate about observing and photographing wildlife and the natural world. He is a frequent contributor to the Clewiston News and the South Florida Water Management and District publications. And the driving force that propels Don to pursue excellence in photography is his passion to share nature's many delights and to promote conservation. He specializes in leading custom workshops, like we just discussed, to Costa Rica, Ecuador, Canada, and Africa, and also locations within the United States. With a preference for smaller groups and one-on-one teaching, Don can maximize the participants' learning experience by centering his teaching around their personal goals. So tonight's topic is, as we discussed, getting the keeper, and Don will share with us all aspects of that and how it comes together to get the shot that is living in nature and your imagination. He will be sharing with us lots of his keepers, which will undoubtedly help to inspire us. I discussed already what to do with the questions. So if you will turn off your video, because the video can steal power from the main program. Also, I was told that we might have a terrible storm starting this evening during the presentation. So if we get cut off, hang in there. We may be able to get our service back. Don't give up too soon, but hopefully that won't happen. So here's Don for getting the keeper.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and then click over to get going here. Let's see, share. Perfect. All right, folks, good evening. How many people are attending tonight that we have an idea, roughly?
I didn't count, but it looked like
36.
36.
Awesome.
Wow.
The bigger the group, the better. So perfect. Good evening, folks. So so you heard the bio. Well, a bio is a bio, but the point I want to make is that just a passionate photographer. I call it passion. My wife calls it obsession. She loves nature, wildlife, but she's not one to want to sit in Tanzania on the river waiting for the migration for hours, waiting for something to happen, sometimes like we do. But being in the right spot at the right time, we all know, is a significant contributor to getting a serious keeper, if you will. So this is a very common shot. I just opened it up with a page here, and there's not probably one among us who doesn't know where this shot was taken. It starts with a W, it has an A in it, it has a C in it. Yeah. And so this is a matter of getting out of the car, sighting what you see in the beautiful colors and realizing, okay, it's too dark to get a shot of any kind of motion. You're not going to do that. What could we do? We need to focus on silhouetted details. And sometimes those shots can be magical. Sometimes they're not. And it's all a matter of being prepared for the trip. And we'll talk about that, like not getting there and determining that the battery is still at home on the charger, or the compact flash card was full from yesterday. All those things really are part of your inventory towards a successful shot. And these are all things that we learn and do once, and we make that mistake and we learn going forward. So all of these shots that we're going to talk about tonight are basically opportunities for us to talk in terms of, where are we at in our journey? Because we're all at maybe a different level, but we all started somewhere and we're all going to end up somewhere, hopefully shooting until we can't see anymore or something like that one day. But let's hope, Lord willing. But basically, real fast, in my toolbox, these are all different tools that I use that help me achieve the particular shot that I'm focusing on. So it doesn't mean you're required to have all of these to get great shots that you can be proud of or print or hang on your wall. Remind me at some point, if time permits, to emphasize why printing is so important in your long-term photographic walk, if you will. I always disclose affiliations for conflict of interest reasons. These are people that I'm affiliated, that I work with, and I have some vested interest in them and me. So I always disclose that. I think it's the honest thing to do. All right. I don't ever promote or talk about a product, good or bad, that I'm not personally using, because I feel that that's, forgive the lack of a word, but that's like prostitution. I'm not doing it. I got to be honestly and ethically sound. So if I'm not using a particular camera for me to criticize it or talk about it or promote it, because maybe someone on here would help me, it is really inappropriate. So I always disclose those. I only print exclusively on Hahnemuhle paper though for printing, because it makes my work look the best it can be. As far as post-processing goes, these are some of the software that I use. I'm really not a guy that likes to sit in a room and process very long, but some photos are required to do that, because I shoot in RAW mostly, because I like the flexibility of catching up with possible technical errors I made, whether I erred on exposure a little bit or a color shift or a balance issue. I can correct those easier. It's an infinite amount of corrections in RAW versus JPEG. Now, let me be the first to tell you that if we go back one slide, we will see that I'm shooting mirrorless Fuji X-T3 a lot, as well as for my landscapes and nature shots other than wildlife, I'm shooting a medium format body a lot. These particular cameras do output substantial JPEGs that are worthy of just turning them right out and using those right off the bat and going to the print with that. However, a lot of wildlife I don't, because I just feel I can control a few more variables in that versus using just a JPEG. JPEG limits me a little bit in that. I really like printing, because printing has made me see things in my work, and it's propelled me to another level, because some things I never saw. You never see some of these not necessarily artifacts, but a lack of your understanding of photography until you either have them printed or somebody prints them for you, or you print them and you hang them and you study them and look at them, or you put them in a gallery and you're subject to your peers. I think that it's a great way, if it's your mission to get better, it's a great way to do it without going to a university of photography, because printing exposes everything from light to shadows to dark to, it just shows you everything. It also shows you angles that you never projected through the lens. The lens is very limiting when you look through a lens. That's what's nice about having mirrorless today, because mirrorless literally allows you to not have your eye glued to the eye viewer, if you will. You see a bigger scope of things than you did before. Very common knowledge here, but I like to operate. Can I ask someone, is my pointer showing up by chance on here?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. I think if you're shooting in Canon particularly, I'm partial to Canon. Why? Because that's where I got started. You know what? I bought Canon the first time around because friends said, if you get Canon, we can teach you. And that's what I did. It could have been Nikon for all, who cares? It could have been anything. I do know that the mirrorless age now has grown leaps and bounds and is absolutely superb now in immediate feedbacks, where histograms aren't even indicated anymore with your particular mirrorless cameras that you can use today. Particularly Sony is stellar. The Nikon line, now the Canon with the R3 and the R5. I mean, it's just a knockout. This year, instead of taking the 1DX2, a couple of those, I'll be taking 1DX2 and a DX3 plus the new R-less Canon to Africa, because of the weight and travel. At 63 now, I find that carrying all this stuff that I used to carry just wears you out. So mirrorless definitely has a point and a reason, but bear in mind, if you're marrying it to your old, good, high caliber glass, you don't save a lot of weight, you save a little bit of weight on the body. But the focus of the pointer is to tell you that I want to operate, particularly in my Canon mode or with a DSLR camera. I want to operate somewhere in this zone here. Everything that's captured in this zone to here, where we see this, is always going to be recoverable and usable, and probably your best bet. If you operate at both extremes in life, here, which is going to be blown out, you're going to basically have clipped whites, etc. Or if you operate in the shadows down here all the way and you underexpose severely, that you're never going to recover the details in a lot of the plumage if we're talking about birds and other shots. So just a reminder that if there's anyone new on here tonight, get help from the club in the sense that these are nothing more than guidelines. They're not mandatory. It's just guidelines that help you shape early learning where you can depend on, for sure, if you're in the unknown and you got $1 million shot, one opportunity, if you've been shooting pictures and you're in this zone, you know that those pictures are going to be recoverable and decent and worthy shots. I think the biggest dilemma we have as a group is all of this going around in our heads, because we could attend Don's meeting tonight and you're going to hear Don tell you something that's very important. When you depend solely on the camera's computer to do all the thinking, to take out all your clinical experience in the field that you have of knowing the behavior of animals, knowing where they're going to fly based on the wind direction, based on the sun angle, etc., that you're shooting. If you depend on the camera to do all that, like some people say, well, I've got all these features, why don't I just use auto for everything? Well, I would suggest to you in a serial shots, sequential shots of 10, you may get 1 or 2, maybe, if you're lucky, and you stay on the light angle and the wind's correct, etc. in birds, because birds don't take off downwind, as we know, they crash. It's obviously airplanes don't either. So the point is that all of these subjects are in your mind, and every meeting you go to, you hear something different. There's one thing that's always going to be there. The Torah and the Bible are always going to be there. It's very clear to me that manual is always going to be there. Now, does it mean you always have to shoot in manual? No, not at all. But in manual, nothing changes unless you change it. In auto mode, things are changing all the time, and you are the one that sets the limits on that. So the biggest destruction that we see sometimes is people depending on the computer and the algorithms to understand what's happening. For instance, say we angle our camera up at Wakota just over the trees to get an exposure in manual. What happens if it's in auto? We aim the camera up, it sees a very bright sky, and it says, oh my goodness, way too bright. Let's dim this down. You take the shot, you look at it in your viewfinder, and you say, like, why is that all muddy, dark, and ugly looking? Because the algorithm in the computer doesn't have your technical experience to know that if you need to increase your exposure, counterproductive to what you normally would do, but the camera computer or the little bitty brain it has is nothing like your brain and your eyes, and most of all, your experience in the field. So it's extremely important as we go through here. I'll talk more about that, but aperture priority works. So does auto ISO. All these things work, but if you don't know how to manipulate those on the fly, because sometimes you have to adjust, because when all of a sudden the bird flies down range in a different light, what happens if it's in auto? It may be too slow of an exposure unless you have your ISO cranked to the max. You could use auto ISO and maybe that could resolve that. But these are just points I want to make to you. There is no gospel on that. It is what you become accustomed to and what you best drive or manipulate. You're driving the bus. These new cameras need to be still driven by you, the photographer. Perfect example of Wakota standing at the rail. And first of all, these are some I took from the teaching file, so we can talk about these. I'm not here to impress you with my photography. There's 1,000,001 shots that could be way better, but I hope I could instill, if you don't have one of that keeper, until you get one of that, great. Throw the others in the trash can once you get one, and then build on that. That's my philosophy. So standing at the rail in Wakota with the light behind us, so I'm facing west to give you an idea, and I'm watching these birds go back and forth feeding, the cattle egrets, right? And they can be so stunning when they're in plumage. but yet it's a bright, harsh, ugly day. This shot would never happen on any auto settings. It only happens on a manual setting. When you've metered just above where the bird's going to fly, I've increased my exposure, because when I shoot down in that black void, if you will, at Wakotahachie, the bird is going to come out what? The bird could come out overexposed, because if I'm in an auto mode, it says dark, dark, raise the intensity. And so the algorithm shifts on its own and creates that, where if I lock it in, the biggest thing you want to lock in is, I want to know that I've locked in a shutter speed that will stop motion. I'm not into blurs a lot. They're technically correct and a great genre in photography, but it's going to look pretty bad if I showed you a totally blurry bird. I want a connection with the subject. I want to feel the direction. I want to feel the motion. So some wingtip blurs are acceptable. By all means, they could enhance and make an image stronger, but I want direct eye contact, well illuminated, but most of all, I want the luminosity and the tones to be as accurate as possible. So whites are, unfortunately in Florida, what do we have? A lot of white birds. So we have a workout every day on luminosity and tonal values. And those are something you become more familiar with. So essentially when I'm shooting, I'm able to keep my eye in the viewfinder, tracking and watching, but I know how to move these fingers. One's up on the half moon dial, adjusting possibly exposure, but I'm in the ballpark on my ISO because I know what that ISO will capable of delivering in my shutter speed. These are all things that you need to think about. Now, you could also create minimum shutter speeds also if you use what they call a shutter value or a TV, or I don't know what Nikon calls it, but the same. You could do that as well. But now what happens when things change? You must be able to change on the fly. And that's really what separates good birds and flight photographers from just a rail shooter, if you will, and getting a couple ones every now and then. You can get them all right if you're capable of thinking in advance and understanding what's shifting as the light changes. I also think, I'm going to see if I can change something here. I want to, okay, perfect. This is an example that I want to show you about how important your foreground, your middle, and your background can be. Just a general picture in Bryce, in Zion, in Bryce Canyon, with the trees starting to bloom, and we were after bison, but they never would get in any good backgrounds. They were always in terrible backgrounds. But I saw this picture, and the first thing it brought my attention to were the levels, the intensity of the levels here, and the difference of separation in background that sometimes we forget about. That's what really makes a stunning picture, when you can control the background, and not all of the times you can do that. But here, basically, just to show you the separation of a foreground, a middle ground, and the background. It's all clearly there. We need to be able to start seeing those things and spotting those things so that we can use those and harness those to enhance our picture, to create stronger images. Now, bear in mind here, from an exposure point of view, a little bit of a tricky scene, right? Because we know the dark greens could be metered off of, or so could the sky slightly above this, and we could get a decent exposure, but yellows are very finicky. Yellows can be over exaggerated or over saturated very quickly with an increase in luminosity, which you could determine by just playing with your sliders. Perhaps if you're ever, processing images, and you can see a slight adjustment can bring it back into where you can see the details actually in the trees. But just a very random picture, but clearly demonstrating the separation of backgrounds. Why won't my picture advance? That's funny. Uh-oh. Okay. So I've done several tours in Alaska. It's been a couple of years. I think this was one 24. I think my last one was 2015 in Alaska, but this mother and bear and 3 cubs were coming. And I had a 300 millimeter f2 Canon lens. When I saw them approaching, it was important to realize, do we just get off a burst and try to get what we call a keeper or something there, or do we wait? Patience is critical. You must wait. So there was many opportunities to shoot the mother and the 3 cubs, but the idea was I wanted to have contact with them. if they were coming sideways, I'd have no contact with the kids here, the cubs. But now we have eye contact in all of them, and we have mother walking along, waiting to enhance the picture with whatever you can, realizing that you're going to shoot this wide open so we can kind of blur out the background the best we can, but also waiting to get the motion forward. We want to show you that it's not just a picture that we shot in a zoo with them standing there looking at us. Maybe they were even stuffed, right? I'm just being funny. But my point is, we know that there's forward motion here and trying to get that. Now, there's a couple conservation things that we need to realize, that getting closer is not always the best, because sometimes showing the natural behavioral background interaction of them is very important. This was on a beach in Alaska, in Lake Clark Shores, which is a fabulous place to do bear photography. Very, very safe, honestly. But she came very, very close to us. We never looked her in the eye, period, because that's just a challenge. But we just kept shooting, and everybody stayed together, huddled, 5 of us in our group, and with our guide, and there was no issues at all. The sad thing is that if you look at the mother, you see how emaciated she is from trying to breastfeed 3 of these cubs. Unfortunately, none of the cubs made it that year. It was a bad year. They didn't make it because it was the blueberries and the salmon run was very badly distorted that year, and so she couldn't feed them enough. So we called her Blondie, but anyway, it's just sad, but these things happen. So I want to talk about, a lot of people, when they talk about critiquing, etc., and the buzzword is competition or composition. Yes, it is an integral element in a technically correct photograph. But at the same time, I don't like for photographers to get totally hung up on it, because it's your picture. It means something to you. Forgive me, the lady's name that went to Baja, New Mexico, but she didn't have time to always get the perfect composition. She was collecting lifers and documenting what she was seeing. So a shot period was what she was trying to get. And the dessert would be, or the whipped cream on top of the pie would be the fact that if she could get something that was well composed and showed you great interaction and great eye contact, if you will. I don't know if you guys are getting a storm, but it's like thundering something fierce outside now. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. But here's the example. This is composition at heart versus negative space. Lots of times when we're new, we have so much negative space that we don't even know better. We don't know what we don't know. And that was where Don was. 100%, zero doubt when I first got started. I had the same calamity that a lot of people do. But look at the difference when we reduce a little bit of negative space. There's a substantial stronger image here than there is here. I also want to point out that this is from Costa Rica, and this was very, very dark in the jungle where we were shooting. These are flashes. These are a flash with a better beamer and a flash extender on my 600 millimeter camera. Okay. And you can say, wow, how can it reach out that far? It's an inverse relationship. It narrows down the beam goes farther. But what you want to do is you can either shoot in what we call TTL mode, which the camera meters it, or you start learning about exposures of adding 1/3 or 2/3 or 1 of stop. The further away from the image, sometimes a little bit more power you need in that. But we're also cycling these flashes extremely fast. And that's where recovery time sometimes becomes a problem, that the flash cannot regenerate fast enough. So not all the exposures are going to be exact. My biggest, if I was to pass away today, and it was a memorial service tomorrow or whatever, you would know, if anybody ever talked about me as a photographer, it's important for me. I don't know why, but it's just my trademark. I want to be eye level. I want to have the very best background I can get, because distracting backgrounds, if I could show you my digital trash can of distracted backgrounds, you would be appalled. They don't even get off the film strip before they're in the trash, because it just doesn't mean anything to me. I want it. Now, if that's my only shot, let's say this was a bat falcon or something, and that was my only shot, of course, I keep it until I have a better shot to replace it. But I think that's where the challenge lies. Within you personally, you are your own judge. And you know better that if you can do better by looking at the picture and saying, well, gosh, I could have moved to the right, the left, up or down. It's just very distorting to take a picture shooting up or shooting down. Eye level is critical. Sometimes it means raising the tripod up the best you can, having a step stool with you. There's been many a times in the Everglades where I'm with photographers and we have a step ladder with us. We're trying to shoot eye level blue herons or white herons or a nest, and we're not at the nest because that violates conservative conservation shooting, but we're far enough back that we want to be eye level. I think the eye is more of a captivating presence to your audience. So this was a much stronger image. The details now become apparent in the natural surrounding behavior of the bird and the actual forest that they live in. The size, if you're trying to, in your backyard, for instance, with buntings or something, please make sure that if you're shooting for a winner or a keeper or something really important to you and your family, I would suggest that you scale up your perch appropriate size. Don't put a log out there for a cardinal or a painted bunting. Try to get a stick that's at the right size, because then it becomes nothing more than really a staged shoot. And for me, I've always prided myself on that. I'm not against zoos. I'm not against that stuff, but I pride myself on trying to get the shot. For me, internally, that's where the rush is. Man, we got the shot. Landscapes are just as equally important to me as well. This is in not Banff, but Glacier National Park, at the very top, going over and going down the other side, Skyway, whatever the road is, I forgot. But we got there, it was getting very dark. It was actually raining and very ugly. Nothing was there. And I thought to myself, man, I can't leave here without a shot. I want to document the shot that I was there. So I told the group, come over, let's get our flashes out. So we basically put a polarizer on this very shallow water. We saw this stump there. It didn't line up as well as we would like it to be. But again, in the essence of not manipulating the shot and capturing something that was actually there, the polarizer brought out these rocks, something fierce, very ugly gray day. So color was not evident. There was no color in the sky. It was more of a grays. Well, let's capitalize on those tones. There's extreme richness in properly exposed blacks and details that you can get. And then we actually exposed this with two flashes, one from each side, at about 1/3 or 2/3 of a little bit of a power, so that we could just bring up enough light here, because if not, this would have been dark. You barely could see any details, and we wanted to bring up the details and have the log kind of lead you to the peak in the back. I think it's called Moraine Lake, if I remember right. But anyway, just an example of what you can turn a muddy situation into by thinking in terms of black and white. That's all we had for years. So in terms of black and white, when I start looking at it, I start to marvel more and more at black and white, the details that you can see. Now, this picture is from, I want to see who's the first person to identify the first downgrade on this picture. This is from the teaching file, and there's a reason why. This is not the framed one. There's a reason why this has a downgrade for me as a photographer. Anybody want to talk or say? Feel free. Okay, look right here. There was a breeze coming. You can see the water was very still here, correct?
Okay.
If it wasn't, we wouldn't have a reflection, even though we did a long, slow shutter speed of about a minute to get the movement of the clouds. But there's a problem here. The brightness was way higher here. So what did I do? I pulled down a neutral density grad filter.
Oh.
See the separation here? A classic sign that happens when the photographer is not diligent enough to realize that he's pulled this thing down too far. And it takes one shot to see it. And as soon as I saw it, I said, perfect. This is what I've been trying to teach for years about people. They get home and they start crying because, oh my God, I blew it. Look at that. It's not the end of the world. The water is a little more turbulent there. You could make an argument, but it's too straight. It's very clearly the neutral grad filter. So being a perfectionist, you know, and it's another shot. So Don, slide the filter back up, pull it down gradually and stop the filter somewhere in here because no one will ever see it in these dark wooded areas that are just basically there for some detail and that's it. You're not going to hurt your picture, but if you pull a neutral grad filter down too far, this is what can happen. So anyway, just a quick note. That's my point, trying to share stuff.
Ah,
Up
gonna
in
have to-
Michigan, chasing owls. And again, what do you see here?
Gorgeous.
Eye level,
Mm.
straight looking at me, zero doubt where the focal attention is going to go. It's in a snowstorm, by the way, snow was falling. This is one shot out of 10 that actually worked. The others had little bitty frozen in motion, if you will, streaking of the snow, which is good. We'll talk about some of that shortly. So I said, you know what? I'm going to have to increase this. And I'm going to have to crank my ISO up because there is no other opportunity. Pushing ISO back then on a 5D Mark, no, a 7D Mark II Canon, pushing ISO to like 1600. But fortunately for me, when I push ISO hard, I want to get to the overexposure on the line as much as possible. Underexposure when you're pushing high ISO is a death sentence. Muddy, grungy looking, forget it. Although Topaz and some other great noise reducers like Nick and others do a great job, back then I couldn't know my head from my fanny when it came to processing. I had to get the shot right, and details was critical. Now notice the depth of field. This actually extends backwards. Look how I focused on the bird, but look what was coming forward and how it falls out of depth of field. You see this?
Mm.
You know why that is? Because I shot this at f4 on a telephoto, but there was one very inherent mistake that was made. I shot this by resting my arm on the hood of a car. The car was off, but heat waves are shimmering up when it's cold outside. A bad no-no. Happened once, learned my lesson. All my other owl tours, there is no shooting anywhere near a hotter subject than the environment. I mean, have your friends sit down and put it on their shoulder, but don't put it on the hood of your car. So you can see distortion starting to happen here. You see this? Look around here. So this is a classic. There's just so much to learn about photography. And that's what drives me, is the fact that, man, there's always a better way to do it. But those eyes, or piercing eyes, are something that, you know, you just don't forget, and you kind of cherish those memories for a long time. I think if we're married to a non photographer spouse, they may say like, oh my God, why are you so excited about it? It's just an owl. But we were there. Isn't it ironic? I hope I'm not the only person here. I can't remember some dates sometimes of stuff with the kids, but I can remember what my settings were, where I was, what the date was, what camera. Isn't it ironic? And my wife said that's really bad. That's pathetic. But but at least I'm truthful. So as we move it along to Alaska, back to Alaska, controlling your background is critical, and waiting for that opportunity, because as you know, if I'm sure I have fellow photographers in the group here, I'm sure there's fellow professionals in this group that have sold work and do talks and lectures and things. It's no doubt that you can make the picture stronger when there's direct eye contact and there's a bonus of eating or something like that going on, whether it was something in their mouth. It just adds to the ambiance of the picture. It's riveting. Now, this picture, we could argue maybe a little too much space in it. I wouldn't consider that critique bad at all. I think that could be a suggestion, but it's very clear where the subject matter is and where the audience is going. But most of all, I like working with very shallow depths of field. If you were to zoom this picture at home, you'll see that this is remarkably sharp. The nose actually is starting to fall out of sharpness because I focused here. And at f4, sometimes you run the risk of that, particularly at f2.8, if you're shooting close. The further away you are, the more forgiving your depth of field. Up close, it's lethal. It's a razor edge. So think in terms of that. But you see the contrast in the brown bear and the green. Instead of shooting this, we walked around to get this shot. I wanted light in the eyes, knowing that this bear was traveling from left to right. We may miss the shot, But what good is a butt shot to me, number one, and what good it would to have those blurred, muddy colors with no fur detail? I mean, look at the hair bristled on his back. This was a big mother sow, and I won't kid you, she meant business. We actually stood still, allowed her to move, and then we backed up even more because you can never encroach on these. They're just, they're not dependable on that. So, especially with a sow, with the kids running around, the kids are in the grass somewhere, and we didn't know. So, at any moment, there could be a problem. So you have to respect that. I'm not a real reptile guy, but this is in Costa Rica. This particular, not a bushmaster, but this particular serpent kills more people per capita in Central America than anything. It's called a fer de lance, F-E-R lance. Deadly, deadly, deadly. And I shot this with a 70-200. This was at a station where a water station was, and there was a trash can there. And one of the guides said, be very careful around here because where there's trash, there's what? Rodents. Where there's rodents, and so we're walking on the path. My goodness, it wasn't 10 feet more, and laying in a litter of leaves right there was this fer de lance. Nasty. Nobody in the group wanted to shoot it. People were really kind of grossed out by it, but I said, man, I got to document this because I've never seen one personally this big in Costa Rica. Notice the pit right here, the heat sensor, just incredible. This is shot with a Canon 70-200. Pretty much, what would you guess? Anybody want to guess my f-stop? I'll give you a hint. Low light.
F2.8.
Yep. F2.8. Notice how everything is going out of focus. See it? What's sharp? Only here.
Yeah,
Only the business end. I didn't want a distraction and have like Nancy going, oh, look, he's missing a scale there. I'd rather her go here and see this. But for me, this was a heart pounding moment. So our guide was there. He had a stick with him and he stood between us. Now, remember, I'm laying on the ground at 7,200. You can get back far, but I'm going to tell you, I took that shot and got up and I was done. I was nervous because, it's just scary. I was never within strike distance because they can strike a long distance, but man, it is no joke. But to document that, again, seeing a species, a lifer that you never had before meant something to me. Do you think I used flash or I didn't use flash?
Yes.
I did. Yeah. See the eye, little bitty catch light. So yes, ma'am. So, yep. So anyway, but this would have been a very grungy, dark leaf litter. It was getting to be twilight, and that's when they're out hunting. Something one must be very careful for, particularly like in Africa where you're walking. I mean, it's just all these precautions have to be taken. Oh, something close to home. One of our normal participants. And so for all these years, mostly you see them flying around with a frog, they'll land, pick up something dead, grungy and eat. Well, this particular one was sitting there watching, and she had little guys down here. And I do these kind of things too. I like doing little workshops with these because it's about getting the shot differently. So this is from a conservation point of view. Notice the environment. This is the classic environment where burrowing owls stay. They're in amongst the grass. They got their mound. They're out there, but they're always watching for what food source could be going around that they're going to get. And the first thing they do, they kill it by, crushing the head, and they always close their eye. I can't believe it. I was at a national contest thing in New York speaking as a presenter, and the guy goes, "Oh God, I wish you could have got the eye open." And it's funny. Obviously, it was a portrait photographer. I don't think that he understood that in wildlife, no animals eat with their eyes open because they're protecting their eye from a possible strike or claw or resistance from their prey, But think about this picture. Does anybody want to help critique this picture? What don't you like? What would you do different? I'm open to it.
I love it.
Notice the background blurring in, showing the natural background. For me, that highlights what could be a normally kind of a mundane looking picture. But notice the details here in the feathers. It's extremely critical. So what did I do? Well, I wanted this to be sharp. You can count the hairs here, but I knew that the focal plane, the plane of focus is critical. So this is not a shot that when you're reasonably close to laying on the ground with a 2-400 or 100-400 or 70 to 200 what you have, you probably want to increase your f-stop, your aperture, so you have a further depth of field. Although you would never want to shoot this at anything much above f5.6 maybe, because we don't want all this to come into detail in the back. We want to maintain this is just a collage of the colors in the back, but yet in the front, I want my audience to see the natural habitat that they live in. I think it makes it a stronger image. So just a thought. Getting back to the histogram, we talked about always checking that. This is critical on most cameras. You don't have to do it as much on a mirrorless because you're seeing it. But remember, if you haven't set your histogram to reflect, no, I'm sorry. If you haven't set your picture style to what you can depend on, there's something called picture style in there that's mostly appropriate for JPEG images, which you will do a lot on. You can shoot raw and mirrorless too, but just bear in mind that you can take your eye off the histogram as you get more familiar with mirrorless, because it's an instant feedback and you can see your luminosity, your brightness, your darks. But for us that are still shooting DSLRs, etc., there's nothing wrong with those cameras, possibly a little heavier, but they are rock solid sound. They can take a beating, unlike drop a mirrorless and you're in big trouble. So just a shot to show you where I focus a lot of my work. An example of birds of flight, showing again what happens when they fly through Wakotahachie down low on the water versus in the air. Believe it or not, I've had to really back off my exposure some on these birds when they fly down and against a black or dark background, because the camera sees that and says, hey, this is dark. Let's increase it. Well, you may have this blown out and essentially have these whites blinking, if you will, if you've set your blinky warnings or your alert warnings. But the idea is that on birds that are far away and you're shooting telephotos, anywhere from f4 to 5.6 is going to get that shot if they're all in the same plane. Now, if those legs were going back at an angle and the bird was flying, say, this way, then the head may be sharp, but the legs weren't. For me, trying to get the capture of the details is important. This is not for Don Hamilton. I'm not saying don't do it. For me, it's never an option for me to take the selection tool, go all around it and cut out stuff and do that. Frankly, I'm sorry, call me lazy, but I can't do it. I just don't want to do it. It's either a shot that's going to be a keeper or it's not. Now, it takes many shots sometimes to get the wing position the way you want it. The last thing I'll say about this picture, and Nancy, is this okay what we're doing? Is this helpful?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Definitely.
Imagine if this wing was, I just took a look at the storm. It's coming. If this wing was intersecting the head, imagine what the difference perception would be.
Yeah.
So taking multiple series of fast action shots are important, because if this wing was down and it was intersecting the head, you wouldn't have the same perception of that head and eye that you do. Now, you folks were talking about stilts earlier. I wanted to include a natural Florida shot where you can, over in Central Florida, when I do like a little Central Florida tour in cars, we kind of carpool up and we try to get everybody to be able to get the same shot. Sometimes somebody will slam a door or whatever, and that doesn't work. But in these fields are where we have so much of it's really a diverse background. A lot of stilts are in there, wood storks, spoonbills, a lot of those feeders are out there. But sometimes you may get there early on site because you're preparing, it's going to be a great day, and you're going to not, I've had people say, I'm not interested in that shot, I'm a birder, or I'm only after wildlife. My goodness, take the shot and determine you want to throw it away later. But what an example of getting reflections. Am I right? Think in terms of that, and the natural colors of the sunrise, not a brilliant day, but the difference in the tonal range as we go up was just amazing to me. And finding that the winds were down, or taking these with fog. Lots of times we'll chase the fog, folks. It's just amazing the shots that you can do. So for some reason, our granddaughter that's almost 3 has it. It's embarrassing, but she has this shot hanging in her room because she likes the purples in this picture. It's just funny, but her name's Harper. But I love the fact that we could freeze something in time. We froze the moment. And how did we do it? we took a long exposure because this was very, very dark. And we actually put, does anybody want to think, did we put a filter on this by chance? Could we have laid a neutral density filter across it? We did,
Yeah.
but we used a very soft one-stop filter and we pulled it right down to the line because this was getting to be a little bit ugly with no details. So just a quick idea, when you're out shooting wildlife, don't miss an opportunity to shoot something else. It may not be your forte, but what it does, it pushes you to think, how could I capture that shot? Because that's going to help you in your wildlife quest as well down the road, I guarantee it. As we move forward, spoonbills. Now this is going to be interesting. I think I have a series of spoonbills I want to show you from what I consider better. An average picture. But what we did do here, and I want to emphasize, we showed, imagine if I don't have a way to show you, but if we cut all this off here, I kept a little bit of the natural habitat of the hydrangea and things like that in. But what I couldn't control was a little bit of the distracting of the wind blowing in here because I needed a fast shutter speed. So you're going to freeze that and it's going to be there. A little bit of distraction, no doubt. But what I want to show you is what I call, you can take it to the bank, X-ray shot. Anywhere from 1/1250th to 1/1600th of a second. 1/1250 or 1/6 in that range to 1/1600th, you will always get this X-ray luminescent looking through the wings shot at those particular shutter speeds. When you start shooting above 1/1600th to say 2000 or greater, what happens is you lose that effect. You have very sharp wing tips, but you don't have, see the little bit of blur in here? You have this depiction of motion. So if that's what you're after, that's one way that you can nail it and take it to the bank every single time, is focusing on that. Now, and realizing now that this head protrudes way out from the body. So you're gonna wanna increase your f-stop. You wanna stop it down so you can get a little more depth of field at the sacrifice of picking up the water, because you can even notice this is generally in focus too. So even the forefront is in focus. So it's the sacrifice you make with that, but just as an example, pre-trip settings and speed are critical. Like if you're going to Wakota or Green Cay, I can't tell you how many people have missed the Bobcat because they get out of their car, the camera was still set up when they were shooting at like ISO 400 or 200 in a bright sky yesterday. They don't have their camera aperture wide open. They're not ready for that. You need to be thinking like in Africa, when we get into rovers before the driver starts to drive, everyone think about it. Look at the light. We know it's coming up. We need to increase our ISO immediately now. Be prepared to dial it back as we go. Open those apertures full. Make sure your camera is set for full speed. Make sure we have good control over ISO, knowing that that's going to affect it. Monitor your shutter speed every single shot, because we want to make sure that we don't miss the hyenas that are latched onto the back of an elephant and he's dragging them down the street and we miss the shot. So this is very, very important. And you know what? This is from years and years of shooting. I never did like wartime correspondence or any of that kind of stuff. I didn't have the patience for that kind of stuff. Actually, I wasn't a photographer until our kids were getting older and, sports were over and you could, you make a transition in life. My dad always did it. My dad shot the actual headhunter Indians when I was a kid in South America. I grew up in Venezuela, American citizen, but I've been all over the world. And my parents shot the headhunters with a Minolta camera that was a piece of garbage. And dad got the most beautiful pictures. And I've been in awe of that. And just as a little motivation for you, my love of wildlife came because we grew up in a poor family, but we got National Geographic every month. I would read those cover to cover. So when I first went to Africa, I will tell you, it was like Marlon Perkins and those guys in Omaha, because I had never thought I'd ever see that again. So for me, it was a life changer for me. Pre-trip sitting or pre-trip settings, having your camera ready. This is in Bryce Canyon, driving along with my wife. I come around a corner and I see only these antlers. And I say, oh my goodness, right by the side of the road. You're not getting out of your car. the camera has to be ready to be able to lay the camera on the windowsill with a long lens and shoot the shot now. 1 or 2 clicks, up they go and they're gone. This is what I want to emphasize, being ready for the shot. It may not come, but if you're ready, you will not have that angst when you get home because you weren't ready. So just, look at the details in this animal. A very benign, maybe not really on somebody's list. Look at the sun angle. Can you see the sun angle I shoot at? See that, the shadow? You know that if this animal's head was turned the other way, like straight, you're not going to get that. The horns, antlers would block the eye. It's all about direct eye contact. So basically, I actually was trying to sit up in the chair on a rental car in Bryce, trying to elevate up. I raised the window up because my arm was so tired from shooting all those days. I raised the window up, put a little piece of a towel on it as a window vibration brake, and use that to raise my camera up to get eye level. And that's just critical. These are all things that I'm sure people are doing here, but there could be one person that we could help take them to the next level. Right here, Wakatahatchee a couple years ago. I love these guys when they have the breeding lure going on here. Just stunning. Several people caught that same picture. It's not a award-winning picture because there's a major distraction. You see it here? Think about this, folks. What would have happened if I would have moved more to the right? If I would have shifted my body to the right, I would have taken this out. If I moved to the left, I would have had this even closer to the bird. You follow?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see me on the camera. So lessons learned. Another great opportunity to do this if we ever go as a group to St. Augustine Animal Farm, or if we go to Orlando, to Gatorland also. There's a lot of these shots that can be had, but they're very tricky because look at the details in the exposure. Very, very difficult. And you want to hopefully have some kind of muted light early in the morning. If you have bright light, forget it. It's just going to be super hard. But early morning shots, that's why we do most of our work is, early mornings or late evenings. Costa Rica, that's back in 2013. Notice the particular shot showing the natural habitat, a decent background, all controlled. It's tropical. You cannot get rid of the black openings in tropical. You can manipulate them, but I'm too lazy to do it. But notice this shot. It's a decent shot. The yellows were toned down because of luminosity. Saturation can get really over abundant if you're not careful on these yellows, but just a natural, perfect zoo shot, if you will, perched on a natural perch on its own in the jungle, shot with a 400, 2 to 400 with a 1.4 on it, Costa Rica tour. But I think I have, okay, so here's the deal. Here's my point. See the shot? The clarity's solid. The eye's great. The angle, the head angle's good. I like everything about it. I like the perch, but look at this picture. This picture was sold to, it's an airlines in South America, and it was on one of their flight magazines, Ecuador, for I forgot what, Lan Chile, I think Lan Chile. But anyway, but notice, does anybody here see a stronger image? This is great. It's a great document, looks good, exposure's good, everything's solid, but look how much stronger the image is, even though it's not as zoomed in as much. We've got the actual habitat, behavioral going on here. Eating, they actually will twirl these around, they'll shell them, and down the hatch they go. They're very interesting. Okay. 2 kinds of toucans I might show you tonight. Okay. Artistic, playing around with a picture. It's acceptable. Doesn't all have to be pure perfection like I've maybe exhibited so far. This was an image that I literally shot initially black and white, because the colors were not that impressive. But what I did is I took the slider up and I started sliding the color slightly up, and it brought out details in the image that I didn't think of before. All right. What you have to critique on this image is if you were going to submit this for a contest or something, you would want to pull the slider down selectively on this, because this is where you're starting to get oversaturated. But you can make a shot out of what? It doesn't always have to be, you can't get all these guys in focus. If I had all of these guys in focus that are separated by 5 or 10 feet, I would be showing the background in Everglades National Park. But the whole idea is to show the reflections in a muted color. And it's just a liberty of taking the artistic, liberties to do what you want to do with a picture. But I think it's a little bit unique in the sense it shows you their natural behavior. Okay, we're coming up. This is a shot. I want to show you the power of cropping an image. Look what happens when you crop an image. This not by all means, not any award-winning image or anything like that. But in my Birds of Flight seminar that Mike Cohen, who's a fantastic photographer, he is probably one of the top photographers in South Florida that I would certainly credit with, is him and I do for the Everglades. We used to do Birds and Flight seminars every year before COVID. And it was so rewarding to see people that could never get a bird and flight shot to bring home real keepers. And that's a testament to Mike and I working together as a team. But I want to show you the capability of a shot. When you zoom in a shot this hard and this largely cropped at 100% or so, if you're shooting a very small megapixel camera, you may not have the details, but it's incumbent upon you to work with the tools that you have in your toolbox. So it also tells me that we need to be on our game where our focal point is. Our focal point needs to be where the action is, and that's lifting the tree here and that eye. And I just wanted to show you the power of cropping, how some unconventional images sometimes may work or may not work. But again, you're responsible for maintaining the luminosity and the correct exposure. Some people get hung up and they say, well, I can't do both. I can't get a sharp and all that. That's incumbent upon you to do all that. And you will be able to do that the more you throw yourself into that particular challenge. Another picture from my owl tours that I'm hoping to get back to doing next year again. On a conservation note, these are way, way, way out in a field. We are never by the side of the road trying to film these because we don't want them associated with humans. That's a whole big topic for another night. But these are owls that are snowy owls. This is the female. The males are solid white. They're like a gray ghost. You don't see them coming until it's too late. They are very territorial. The females, if they're not in the mood, they're not going to have a male in there hunting in their area. This is on a takeoff shot with a 1DX2, about 20 frames per second with a whole series. However, not absolutely a stunning picture because the background is somewhat distracting. If this could have been shot from another side, and had I known the animal was going to, remember, you see these in a field and you may walk in the snow for a block or two. You don't always know when they're going to lift off. Sometimes you're crawling up there because you don't want to spook them. It just, it just depends. But the point of the picture is exposure. Does anybody want to hedge a guess? Did I overexpose or underexpose this image to start with? Like, what did I do with my settings? You must overexpose. Over. This is 1.5 to 2 stops plus all day long.
Okay.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it? You would think it'd be so bright, the reflection coming off, but it is. It's so bright, the reflection's coming off. The camera's confused. It doesn't register. It doesn't meter properly, and it would give you a darker picture. So you can meter off the snow if you want to, and dial it up about 1 to 1.5, and you'll be in the ballpark. This is actually +2.
Wow.
Another example of working with the whites a little bit. This is what can happen if you have a little bit of a color shift. Although this is the actual natural color, but this is what happens when you have a little bit of a color shift. You see a little bit of the tans in there. This doesn't look like the normal whites you see, although this is the classic underbelly. Do you see the actual wingtip kind of a little bit of a flutter here? This is what happens at 1600 to 2000 range. Now, not every day is a good day. There's days you come home. I know I'm winded. I'm trying to get there, Nance, but there's just so much to say. But how many people know, what do we call the little harrier? Not the harrier, but the little raptor that sits on the line. It's very small.
Kestrel?
Kestrel, the devil bird. The kestrel is so hard. You can chase them all day in your car on Central Florida, all along, branch to branch. And one day you may actually pull up and there he sits, and you take the picture and you discover that your shutter speed was too low. and you had the lifetime shot of a Kestrel, full frame, 600 millimeter, not an ounce of room to spare, full frame. And you get home, this is years ago, and you look at it and you're so excited. You call your wife over and she goes, I think it's a little blurry, Don. And you go, yeah, you're right. And there's no topaz going to fix that. There's nothing's going to fix that. And it was because of sloppy technique. So I show you this, that you may come home one day from Green K and you may feel like that, but there's better days. So a little bit of, I want to give you a update on what you may be missing. How many people go to the Locks Refuge? You may have been there. If you haven't, I suggest you go over there because it can be good sometimes. This was a morning shoot where we found no birds. We're at the Locks Refuge. The light is coming up to the east. I saw that. And so I shot this with my 50 megapixel medium format camera, just trying to get the details out and show the scene to give to Eleanor over there. Well, you see the gator. I saw this gator and I thought, well, maybe he'll get closer, but yeah, so what, right? So I shot the shot. I said, okay, well, we're done. Let's go look for some birds. And I start to turn around and I turn her back around and I say, oh my goodness. Now look, whoops, this is the same shot, folks. All I did was stand and move to the left. The same shot, sunrise before sunrise. Now the witching hour is happening. Look at that. That is at the Locks Refuge. Look at the details in the hydrangea, in the lily pads, and look at the reflection. The point is, don't give up. Always stay. Don't be the first to go home. Be the last to go home and check out. Now look what happened when I packed up and started walking away. The same area, I just kept walking back to the car on the rabbit, what's it called? Rabbit Marsh Trail or Marsh Trail right there? Something like that. Yeah. And so, and a beautiful God rays were coming up here. And it's nothing special, but it's one in your memory keeper. And it was mosquitoes like you wouldn't believe. Now here's me shooting, and I use a neutral density filter, quite a bit, graduated, soft, a lot, but notice the mosquito suit. The mosquitoes were just wicked. I mean, that you could go like this on your arm if you had a white Columbia shirt on and you'd rake the black off. It was that pathetic. So you got to be prepared. Got to be prepared. This is called a toucanet from Ecuador. Dark, 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 dark. A shot that you probably wouldn't even take because of a little bit of a distorted background, but notice what flash can do. I think a lot of us, Nancy, have gotten away from flash. It became a pain lugging it around, doing it, but sometimes flash with a better beam or extender for wildlife can be very helpful. By the way, I think repeated flashes on a close proximity is not a healthy way to go. However, a bird will fly if a bird is disturbed. That's not our mission to do that. We don't want to do that. But if you ever see that happening and you're stalking a subject and the bird does move or fly, obviously you're encroaching. But I don't accept the argument that flash is detrimental, that they're blinded, this and that. I've seen it with very world-renowned National Geographic photographers using diffuse flash, subtle diffuse flash, put wax paper across it, buy a diffuser, whatever it is, but it makes an image turn into something that at least is an image versus no image. Very difficult to expose in a jungle because there's no light. Sometimes there's light coming in from above, but a little bit of a flash, just a kiss is all you need. This is in Ecuador, the booted tail, which had been on my list for years. You can clearly see what I want to show you is don't get carried away with flash. This is one from the D can, the delete can, because it's over flashed. Can you see it? It looks a little over flashed, a little bit too much. You can see it here. Wet subjects tend to reflect the water back. Tone it down. Drop it down to a third, put a diffuser on it, and it would look a little less flash, but just stunning to capture the detail. By the way, you can't stop a hummingbird in flight. You're not going to stop it at 1/8,000th of a second. This is 1/64th of a flash, 1/32nd of a flash. That's what stops the motion. Okay. Another one here. This one got booted out of a competition because of the distraction of this. It's just a shame, but it was a very hard species of thistlethorn in Ecuador, high up in the mountains. Dang near killed me getting up there because it was just altitude was getting me. But I just want to show you what you can get if you persevere. What a cutie, huh?
Mhm.
Just stunning, a little booger. We're getting into the witching hour here, so I may pick up a little more speed and jump through some, but I want you to work your subject. This is what we see a lot of on the Central Florida tour, maybe some roadkill or something, or animals that are stalking. Predation is part of wildlife, right? But if you don't work the angle on the picture, you're not going to get the eye contact. You're not going to actually get the morsel of meat in there. Be prepared to move around. Some folks want to jump out, take the picture and say they got the shot, but look how much better a picture would be if you could tell a story. Are you actually telling the story of the viciousness of the roadkill, the mafia garbage group here? It's just funny, everybody has a chore. Costa Rica, a flirting moment with a tanager. This tanager was very elusive, and again, trying to get him to naturally land on a perch. I didn't set this perch up. You can't. It's a piece of weed that's dying and decaying, but being patient, knowing what their trajectory is, and they're flying back and forth and waiting for the shot. And this was shot in the rain, actually. High speed, the best you could do. Different toucan shot here. Now notice this toucan. This is called a black mandible toucan. Looks totally different than the Cheerios or whatever Fruit Loops toucan you may know. But this one was telling the story. What's the story? He's eating these really ripe, gushing, juicy berries, and they squirt out everywhere. It was amazing. I almost didn't get the shot. Oh, here's one for you guys. Somebody in the group said, "Oh my God, you manipulated this picture. Look at those blue feet." Those are natural, my friends. That's nothing manipulated. They have blue feet. It's incredible. But my point is, getting that shot, it may be a little cluttered, but that's a natural behavior shot that you could use in a documentary. You never know. I mean, you just don't ever know when that shot could be useful. But again, the criteria is there. Eye contact, correct head angle, waiting, moving. You have to move. He's not going to move. He can only eat the berries from one angle. You've got to move. So it means moving. One of the most highly sought after owls for me in my lifetime has been these guys. And instead of getting the typical shot, for me, I'm always open-minded to this group because we're going to wrap it up and open up for questions. But you could shoot this on a branch looking at you. He'd be looking down at you because you're not going to get that tall. Or you could lay down in the snow and try to work with the natural habitat, which is the stark reality of what winter's like. And there's not a morsel out there, but yet these guys can hear and know when there's a vole somewhere underneath the snow. And they'll come down from a tree and they'll sit there and cock their heads, and all the next thing you know, he'll jump up and just come right down into the snow and pull out a vole, which we're right there. We never heard it, we never saw it, but yet they can. It's magical. And so just absolutely stunning creatures. Something very close to home, Fort DeSoto, a great place for us to do a photo tour. So many great opportunities. Again, Hamilton trademark, laying down in the sand with a beanbag, shooting straight on, perfect plane of focus. And I don't want the background. I want the background to maybe enhance it with a collage looking out of focus, non-distracting background. But bear in mind, the whites are critical. Central Florida, very capable at sunrise, finding these guys. All you got to do is look. Don't have to call them. Sometimes there's questionable conservation ethics about calling them, particularly if you're calling them in the Everglades, like people do by the road down there. It disturbs me because they could fly into a car. I just don't think that that's a cool idea. There's places these guys hide. They frequent territories. How many people are familiar with Dinner Island?
In there.
Okay, this is where this is at, right there. When you first come in and make a left to the bend, there's a couple of trees over there really grown over there. It seemed like the parents always are hanging around there. All right, so how do we get this widgeon shot? All my years, I may look stupid or sound stupid here, but all my years, I would envision a shot on Golden Pond. I could never get it. I don't know how they got it. Good photographers like, no, I'm not going to, I shouldn't say their names. Good photographers that are world renowned would never tell me. You'll learn it. You'll figure it out one day. This was in Denver. This is on a lake with a whole bunch, very cold, about 28 degrees, winter. Everything is tan and brown. the light is coming over me, looking right at the bird, but the light was hitting the tan reeds.
Mm,
It reflected in the water.
mhm,
No wind. All this coloring in the water was the natural color from the actual reeds outside of Denver, Colorado. And that's how these guys get the shots on Golden Pond. That's how you get the shots of the stilts and that beautiful green water down in the Flamingo National Everglades Park. It's because it reflects off that green grass that's right next to the water. And you have to be patient and wait for him to swim into it. And you can see he was pushing water. All I did was wait for him to swim into it. You can see he was moving a little bit of a blur, but just enough to show you the details.
mm.
That's how these shots are had. This is a mangrove tanager from Ecuador, very rare bird. Hangs out in the mangroves. Very, very hard to shoot. They don't ever stay long. They're always flirting around. Part of the warbler family. Very interesting.
Mm.
Local Everglades, capturing the shot. You gotta, and you know what? You're gonna shoot a lot of those to try to get the shot. So I think I'm gonna start to wrap up here. What I want to do is spring to the back of this presentation so that you can have my contact information. I do answer emails. I despise people that don't answer them. I do. And so I'll be glad to share that with you as I get to the back. Oh, last one. Okay, we got spoonbills. We have spoonbill season now, right?
Mhm.
Okay, if this is your spoonbill picture, you could say, oh man, I got a good one. You did get a good flight one. You got exposure right. You got a blurred background. You got great wings. You got it off. You got the light on the head. That's good. But look at the difference.
Mm.
It's a different picture. Why? Because look at the tones. This was shot in that muddy gray sky, 12/50th of a second. Look at the X-ray effect versus this shot was shot with an easterly exposure. And you can see where the sun was coming just behind the wings because you can see what was open. Two different settings.
Mhm.
But bear in mind, this, what I would call high key image here, can work for some people. Some people it does, some people it don't. It just really depends on what it is that you're after. So I always tend to run over. I'm going to leave you with this image and then move immediately to the back. Being ready, seeing an owl sitting on a post in Canada, Ontario, Canada, where I do owl tours, waiting, thinking like, okay, what's he going to do? He's hunting, he's looking for something, right? But how long can we wait? I said, you know what, gang? We got to crawl up. It's not going to be easy, but let's get down low. Let's crawl up and be ready. Because at some point, there's going to be another owl. Someone's going to come in here and he's going to fly. We could only hope that we could get off a bunch of shots on the takeoff. And that's what we did.
Mm.
So you may feel like that sometimes. My all-time favorite is this guy right here. This is called a Cuban Toady. This is from the Dominican Republic. All-time favorite. I have dreamed about this bird for years. Come to find out they're endemic in Dominican Republic. They're from Cuba, and just the most gorgeous little bird. A real pistol though. Had me crawling through thickets and everything like that. So Africa, Nancy, this is the stuff we see in Africa.
Yeah.
Big, big, big. But anyway, let me get to the end here. Okay. Oh, by the way, dinner key. Look at
Yeah.
this. A
Beautiful.
beautiful shot that I saw and said, you know what? Hold up, guys. Oh no, man, we got to go get the owls. I want owls. I go, dude, we're getting this shot. You need to get this shot. Take it home. It'll be a painterly shot if you shoot it right. Look at the fog in the back. So that's what I'm saying. Here's when he took off. Remember the owl? Took off from the thing. But here we are. I'm going to leave it. I call this, for all my friends, I call it the Passover tree or the Resurrection Sunday. We just came from that. This was in Africa. And it just made me think of, you know, a godly event, because it was the most time-stopping moment in Africa I think I've seen in a long time. So I'll turn it over to Nancy. I thank you so much. Nancy, we've tried to do this for 2 years, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
You're a
We
very
made it.
persistent gal.
I didn't want to give up.
You didn't, and I thank you so much. I'm ready for questions, answers, suggestions, anything I can do.
Okay, well, I want to thank you too, and I think everybody else wants to thank you. I have a few questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. One of them was when you were talking about settings, it it says, I like highlight exposure mode when shooting white birds. Is that cheating?
No, no, not at all. That's
What
using the
is-
tech.
What is highlight exposure mode?
Is this person referring to making sure your histogram and your alerts are set so you don't clip the whites?
I wasn't sure. That's
Well, we can ask them. It's okay. They can chime
Kevin.
in.
Yeah, if you want to open up your voice and speak, if you're still here.
Yeah, everybody can
Yeah,
unmute.
yeah, I'm still here. No, it's instead of just the multi-mode for setting exposures that takes the light measurement everywhere, it
Yes.
takes the light measurement off of the highlights.
Yes.
That's
So
in my
you're-
Sony camera.
Yes, there, exactly. So basically what you're doing is you're not depending on what I would call a balanced exposure. You're going right for that luminosity tonal value on the whites. That is very smart, my friend. That is a
Okay.
sign of somebody who's thinking out of the box, because that's ensuring, folks, that he's not going to get home and have a whole bunch of blown whites. Now, have you ever noticed, Kevin, though, sometimes if you don't have it balanced right and you haven't selected that correctly, that you may err a little bit on the dark side, not the dark side, but have your darks maybe not be as clear as you want? Or is it?
It does make everything darker, absolutely. And of course,
Yeah.
the worst mistake I've made with highlight exposure mode is forgetting to turn it off
Mm.
and then going to shoot some of my African-American friends, and then I
Yeah.
ruined a whole bunch of
Oh,
shots that I
yeah.
had to then spend
Yeah.
a lot of time post-processing to make them usable.
Yeah.
So that was a major mistake.
That is just excellent to bring that up. And I hope the folks that are here tonight, if you don't quite understand what he's doing now, if you're not a Sony user, you can do this on some other cameras, but if you are a Sony user, highly recommend you take advantage of it. But again, your knowledge of your camera is so important. It's everything. So by the way, sitting on your couch at night, playing with dials and going through the menus repeatedly and changing things, there's no harm. You can always restore it back to normal default, but it's a person who knows their camera, that's where it's at. And it's critical. And we have the same capability in like a Canon 1DX2 to do that, but you actually have to shape it a little bit and limit it, but it's easier in Sony 100%. They're a leader. I'm going to tell you, man, Sony is killing it. But next, good point, Kevin.
Yeah, I have a question. I use the 100 to 400, the 1.4,
Okay.
and that limits me to F8.
Yeah,
wrong.
that can hurt you, Nancy. Especially first thing in the mornings, that's just low light. It means you're going to have an exorbitant, very high ISO to combat that. What camera is this on?
5D Mark IV.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the downside with that. I honestly, you know, your spouse may not want to hear this, but someone of your caliber who is passionate shooting and has many years to shoot, and you're not a flash in the pan. You need what we would call a lower f-stop camera. You need something that would not transcend and automatically to 8 with that on. You need a better prime lens probably for that, because you're certainly not a lady that's a flash in a pan. I mean, you're shooting. So some people buy this expensive equipment and they never use it. That's a different story, but I don't see that with you. That is the downside of the older 100 to 400 idea technology that we used. The same thing can happen in Africa. I shoot anybody familiar with a 2 to 400? Nikon's got one, Canon's got one, but we have a built-in 1.4 on ours. So the built-in 1.4 means that I'm able to not have to go to F8 when I dial in the 1.4. When we put a manual adapter 1.4 on there, teleconverter, we all have to jump up one or more f-stops, and that hurts us dramatically, particularly in low light. If you're shooting an air show, harsh light, that's fine. But wildlife, that's a real tough one there. You'd be better, so much better with a prime lens. Even if you got a prime 400 that was 5.6 or something that's better, way better than F8. But anyway, that's what's hurting you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It is. Yeah. And these things aren't cheap. I agree.
No, they aren't. We can talk cameras another time.
Yes.
I
Next
like
question.
that. Okay. Anybody else want to open up their microphones and ask live questions?
Certainly welcome. Sorry we ran over a little bit, but
No, that's fine. No, I'm glad you at least gave us a look at your other pictures, even though we didn't, I love this one.
This one here, this is a shot that we can all make, a foggy morning. Somebody help us out. What's the name of over on the West Coast by Captiva, the preserve, the refuge?
Oh, I don't know.
Captiva or some, it's a funny name.
Ding
But
darling.
there you
Darling.
go, Ding Darling, exactly.
Oh,
I
Dendar.
love these little juvenile guys. They're so photogenic.
Yeah, they
and-
are.
And basically in the fog in the morning, but basically, does anybody want to guess how we got this look across the bottom right here?
Hmm.
There was grass, green grass
Ah,
in the bottom
okay.
of my 400 telephoto lens.
Hmm.
I had my pointer on his eye, extremely important for me again. I'm
Mhm.
laying down in that nasty mud with my elbow, keeping the camera out of it. And basically there was green in the bottom. I learned this years ago. We can influence the background color, very subtle. I did it with the owl too, by the way, the owl on the bottom, you see that green collage. If you
Mm.
have the green or color, whatever color is in the bottom of your, you know how the telephotos have the big hoods on them?
Mhm.
If there's a little bit of color in the bottom of the hood, it reflects on that lens and gives you that, but you have to know how far to lift it or lower it to get that, so you don't have all this out of focus over the top of your bird.
Interesting. It was
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
picture after that. The landscape, I think, is stunning.
After that, this one,
That one,
Yeah.
yeah.
straight out of the camera. But no, by the way, this was shot with a Fuji X-T3 mirrorless camera, straight out of the camera, and basically just dialed it down. And I tend to, I don't know if Kevin would agree with the Sony, but I tend to don't misunderstand underexpose. You cannot go, if you have darks or blacks or shadows, underexposed by very much, because you'll be sadly disturbed when you find those lack of details. But green is our closest friend to an accurate metered subject. So if you meter off the grass and you know that that's about a balanced exposure within your camera, and you have an idea, and you can even snap a picture first and make sure these white clouds are not getting too far out of balance. You can see there wasn't a whole lot more room left here before we were to start to blow these and they'd be a little too white. But this misty fog was coming in, and there's a river of grass that goes right through here to here. It was just something I saw. This is in Dinner Island, going across a culvert, looking to your left, looking to the east.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
shot's available for other people to get too. It just depends on the lighting. You
Did
want
you-
a diffuse lighting day, but I just thought it was a natural attempt to show you conservation at its finest. Because what I see in here, I see spoonbills, wood storks, whatever could be in there. This is the
Mhm.
kind of stuff that we as Audubon and birders and just caring people need to protect, period. 'Cause this is
Hi,
gonna be gone. Go ahead.
hi, it's Kevin again. One shot I had trouble setting up was trying to get the painted buntings at Green K when it's always too dark with them underneath the trees. And I
Yeah.
want to get it painted bunting in flight. And so do I did buy a flash that is so advanced, I don't know how to use it. But what kind of settings and how should I set up that shot to try and get a flight picture for a painted bunting?
Right, so would I take it that you're behind the center there, you're maybe sitting down on a tripod, waiting, being patient, or are you on the move all through the refuge?
No, I was like at the entrance, there, you're just standing there waiting. I
Okay.
generally do handheld instead of tripod, but if
Okay.
I need a tripod, I would
No,
certainly set one up.
no, not at all. Well, here's the problem. The problem is that a flight picture in those dark shadows is going to require a significant shutter speed. You're going to need, maybe you could blur the wingtips at around 800 to 1,000, but you're going to need every bit of a thousandth of a second, Kevin, and you know that's going to require a maximum effort, heavy lift on the ISO capability. What you could best hope for is, depending where these birds are landing, if you could try to figure out where they're landing and setting up and flying back and forth from, is to try to find out if it's a little bit higher, there'll be more light on the subject versus if it's down low, like right behind the center there where the guest center is, right behind it. A lot of people try to shoot them there, but they're way down in the dark shadows there. And
Yeah.
this is a common thing. So you're going to need to open the f-stop wide open. I would encourage you, even if you had a shorter lens, to experiment a little bit, like if you had a 70 to 200 or something, watch their habitat, watch where they're going, get as close as you can, sit down, be still, even if you're hand holding, and use an F2 if you can, because you're far enough away from it, you'll probably still be in the same focal plane. It'll afford you opportunity to get a better shutter speed. But I know it's really hard. It's a major challenge with that lack of light in there. It happens all the time. But if you can, every day is not the perfect day for it. If you could have bright light but overcast, that would be just dynamic. But they're more of early mornings and late evenings. They're not really middle of the day kind of birds either. So I think that you're on the right path, but you're gonna have to crank that ISO big time and get the biggest aperture opening you can get, because that's the only thing that's gonna help you. Because I mean, what do you have for Sony? What are you shooting Sony?
So no, I have the Alpha 7 Mark IV,
Okay.
which has the bird eye autofocus mode,
Yeah.
which I absolutely love, and the 200-600 lens for that.
Right, but what does that do, Kevin, when you go to 200 to sliding towards the 600 range? What's it jump up to, your f-stop?
So I mean, I've been shooting mostly at f9 so that I could get full depth of field on birds, but I mean, it will go down to like 6.3.
So could you be at 600 at 6.3?
Yeah.
That's important. Do that. You'll have plenty of depth of field. Unless you're really super close. How far away are you?
10 feet, 15 feet.
You'll have depth of field, because yeah, try that. You'll be pleasantly surprised. That is a huge increase in light coming through that lens, which means what? Higher speed capability immediately. But you can play, listen, it's a great opportunity to play. If you're having this frequently, it's a great opportunity to crank up to auto ISO, set your shutter speed at a minimum that's acceptable, and let it take its own aperture and do its own thing. But you want to set the fact that you want a minimum shutter speed of 1000. It's got good, what I call image stabilization in it, but the problem is the bird is a very quick bird. It's not like a big wood stork or a pelican. It's a very fast bird. So again, you're going to need 1,000th of a second to get an award-winning image there, a magazine shot. But it's doable.
That's a lot slower than I normally shoot. I usually try to do 1/3200th of a second.
Yeah, you won't need that. I don't think you'll need that. Try it. Try 1/1250, 1/1600 and see the difference. You got a much higher shutter speed. You've got the light, lower ISO. I guarantee you can freeze an image, because if you saw all the images that we took back here, those images were all shot. That's shot at 1,000 12/50th of a second. But they're very slow wing flappers. You understand? So that's something to think about. These guys here, I mean, they're shot at maybe 1,600, maybe 2,000. I hardly ever shoot anything at 3,200. In a hummingbird, I may try to, but not necessary. Even this is the same thing. This was shot at 1,600 to 2,000 max, because it's very dingy over low light. So yeah, I guarantee you'll freeze the wings at 1,650 to 2,000. You don't need 3,200 on that. Try it.
I'll give it a shot. Thanks.
You're welcome. Same thing here. This is 1,600 on this guy. So what else? So great comments. Anybody else? What about, does anybody remember a picture they saw, they go like, man, I wouldn't have done it that way? It's okay. That's where conversations happen.
Do you use tripod a lot? Or
in Africa, we don't. We use bean bags, and we have big rails all in our things, because you imagine holding 400s or 200s, for 13 days. Yeah, no. In person, like on my Osprey tours, no. I don't use a tripod, because the motion from people moving, walking, tripods in monopods are only good if it's you or you're shooting with a dedicated shooter that you say, I'm shooting, he's shooting, but distortion can happen big time. So we don't, you know what's funny? I don't think we use tripods as much as we used to. Now, my dad does, he's 89 and I have to help him with that. And there's a reason for that. But if you can handhold, you can quickly pivot, capture so much more behavior. Like for instance, can you imagine if he's only trying to not, if Kevin's only using tripod, you know how they flirt back or flip back and forth? Imagine that. But there are people that sit there all day with a tripod down low, waiting for that one shot back there. And that's okay, that they're on a mission. But no, the answer is no, Nancy. They're good to have. You're not going to take them on a vacation with your husband and you're shooting somewhere. It's just not happening. People kick them. By the way, a lot of people don't want tripods around anymore. A lot of Federal Reserves don't want them. So anyway.
But when you're using the ESD, the
1DX2?
no, the filters that you use to decrease the amount of light.
Yes. Now landscape, yes. Tripods. Why? Because I shoot very long exposures.
Yeah, that's it.
I like to shoot very long exposures because I can get motion in there. I'm just trying to find out if there's one comes up.
In the clouds.
Yeah. I like to get the clouds streaking. So yes, I do all my landscapes, unless it's just a quick shot, you know, that I saw and I have to move on, they're all tripoded.
Okay.
But for wildlife, no, barely, hardly ever tripods for wildlife. It's just not, I can't compensate quick enough. I can't turn quick enough, even though I have a gimbal head and Wimberley and all that kind of stuff. It's, you know, for birds you can, like if you're set up on a nest, like on the beach, for instance, if you're shooting plovers or something and they have a nest and you want to be patient, oh, it's a great idea. You can sit down, you don't break your back, you're not laying down. It's a great idea. But for most opportunities that we shoot, spoonbills, Wakota, forget it.
Got it. Great.
Was anybody around a long time ago when a guy had a 500mm camera, his flash unit, everything on his camera, Wakota on the first thing on his tripod, and one of the joggers came by and he said, "Hey, there's no jogging, there's no running here." And she mouthed off to him, he mouthed off to her. And then she came back around the next time and literally kicked his tripod and it went over.
Oh my God.
It went all the way over. I'll never forget seeing that 500mm f4 cannon and the whole thing hitting the water. Oh yeah, they called the cops. He did wrong. He held her there, but against her will, which is not good, but he held her there. Anybody know Mike Stern?
The name is familiar. Yeah.
It was him. Anyway,
Oh,
he had to pay for it. Yep, she had to pay for it. So I don't use tripods there. It's just not in your best interest.
Makes
And
sense.
by the way, Mike Cohen and I teach people that I think Kevin will tell you, Kevin's not standing there the whole time like this holding it. He's got it down by its side and he's bringing it up when he's anticipating intersection with his light zone where he's going to shoot. None of us stand there like in Africa and hold that 600mm waiting for the shot. It's down, but it's ready for us to throw it up. And when it's coming back down, we're getting the shots. Because after a while, you know, we start to get, you know, carpal tunnel or rotator cuff, all these things. So anyway, there's secrets to that. And that's the stuff we work on when we do workshops, because, you know, we all have our limitations of that. So yeah, so.
Definitely. So let's see. We have some comments. This was a terrific presentation, wonderful photos and excellent advice and tips. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, I hand hold everything for wildlife, no tripod. That's just extra weight to carry.
Yes.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Who's the person who just made that comment? Can I ask?
Which
about
one?
tripod?
The tripod?
That was me, Kevin.
That's Kevin.
Oh, Kevin, an excellent point. And also, Kevin, you might have already learned in your early walk or journey here that playing around with a tripod, you miss a lot of shots, don't you?
I can't move it fast enough.
There you go.
And so I end up lifting the whole thing and it's just extra weight. And I tried using a monopod, but even that's just extra weight.
Exactly.
But no, the shoulder sling is excellent. Most of the time, you're right. It's at my side and I just swing it up when I'm ready to shoot.
Yeah, can you guys hold 1 second? I want to get
Sure.
one thing and show you what he's talking about. 1 second. I think I have it right here because I had it packed up for my next trip. 1 second.
I paid less than $10 for it. I mean, they make some shoulder slings that are more than 100 that are really fancy and really adjustable and really nice, but
Yeah.
it works.
All right,
Yeah.
Nancy, somebody guide me if you can see this in the camera, okay?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so what is this? It's a really right stuff, just regular sling, right?
It's funny.
That we've all seen, right? And this basically goes on your shoulder,
Yeah.
comes around here. I just want to show you something because the secret, here's the secret. So let's say we button this up together, right? Okay, so now here's the secret for people like Kevin and me. Note this. Do you see this?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, this opens. 1 second. Two seconds. This is a lifesaver. Okay, this happens to be a Fuji 70 to 200, not a 400 or 600. But all of our cameras, I'm sure Kevin's got a rail on his, right, Kevin?
I'm not that advanced yet.
Oh, okay. Well, these are easy rails that you can get. They're not that expensive. By the way, you don't have to buy really right stuff. You can, by the way, if you guys need help on equipment, you can reach out to Bedford Camera and Video. I'm not supposed to say it out loud, but they do discounts. They do discounts to people, and just mention my name and he'll help you. He'll give you a discount on products. But anyway, so what happens is my camera body is on here. You never want to hold on a bigger lens. You never want to hold just the camera and have the lens hanging there. You will detach that and break that in short order very quickly. So what I do, imagine that I have my 400 millimeter lens on me, right? So now the camera body is here. This is going to hang at my side like this.
Yeah.
And I just throw it up and take the pictures, but it's hanging on my side like this, down.
Half
So-
of you is disappearing.
All that weight is off of my arms and shoulders, and it's just hanging there. And then I reach down, grab it, bring it up, and I'm shoot right-handed and take my picture, put it back down, and now my hands are free. I don't have the shoulder pain, the discomfort. It's
Yeah.
a great way to do it. But what I'm trying to show you is this little bitty adapter. Don't remember the name, but it came from Bedford. It's got a name. I'll research it and get it to you, but it has a safety
good.
device on it where it will not come undone. Like a lot of these people that screw a little thing into the bottom of their camera,
Yeah.
very dangerous. That can come undone from vibration and just driving from here to Clewiston. But this
Yeah.
has, you have to activate this to unlatch this and open it, and then the lens comes free.
That sounds
So,
good.
so for people that want to walk in like botanical gardens or some other place, well, Cotahatchee, you can walk with this by your side. It stays right by your side because it's secured in here. If you want to take it off to shoot, you just undo the clip by just opening the bracket, which has a lock on it right here. And when I unlock it, it comes loose. It can't come undone any other way. You follow?
Yeah.
It's a real safety thing. So I like it a lot. And it's basically just a regular strap. The problem is a lot of people will hook up this strap to their lens with a loop on it, and this can open up and fall. This is impossible to have that happen on. So this is, Mike Cohen can tell you in Africa how he dropped a 400 millimeter camera
Oh, God.
years and years ago. So anyway, this prevents that. So Tim and
Yeah,
I-
Don, one last thing on that setup. I mean, I do have these strap screwed into the bottom of the lens, so it's supported that way. It's definitely not attached to the camera. But what I also do is I rotate the camera 45 degrees so that my hand is supporting under the lens and not
Yeah.
supporting under the
Yes.
the
Yes.
foot.
Yeah, the foot causes hand pain.
Right. So I rotate the foot out of the way so that my support hand is underneath the lens.
Yeah, he's shooting like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But what you can do is, Kevin, you can do exactly that. You can have that already rotated up where you know you want to shoot. You have this on. So when you bring the camera up, you're already ready. This is up here.
Yeah, I don't have it all the way up. I just have it 45
To the
degrees
side.
up from the bottom.
Yeah,
So
you got it to the side, like right here.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
little less
sure.
wood.
I mean, but that's all personal comfort, but he's absolutely right. You don't want to balance. You take a day of balancing this on your hand, it's never as good as a wider platform like this. Yeah. And always shoot with your hood out. Don't ever shoot without the hood on, because you're going to get a lot of reflections that happen
Yeah.
on these lenses without the hood. These hoods actually serve a very important purpose. A lot of people think, it's just for show or protection or whatever. It's not raining. I don't care. No, you need those out there because you get light coming in and you get diffraction, and it can really mess up a beautiful picture. So something to think about. So anyway,
Definitely.
great stuff. I mean, this is where hopefully one day we'll get back to our normal presentations in person. We're getting there, but in the meantime, Zoom's the best we can do. And I think we can still cover ground. So it's all good.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I hope I didn't talk everybody. Any other ones, or thank you for
You
the
did a great
comments.
job, and we really appreciate it. So
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
And I'm glad to see, you know what, I will say this, I'm very glad to see the club open-minded to even landscapes and stuff other than just, birds and stuff. Good for you. Good on y'all. That's good.
Well, we have some people very interested in conservation, and they have a conservation course
Sweet.
that's associated with Audubon. So Audubon does think less narrowly than you'd think, not just on birds, but the bird's environment and
Yeah.
everything that will keep birds alive.
Yeah, I was reading a thing about really how maybe me feeding birds in my backyard is not a good idea. I was reading about that too a while back, about doing the COVID thing, about making birds dependent on the seeds here and stuff that we're feeding them. So it's good stuff. I mean, it's good stuff to open our minds and think about it. There's no one answer to all of this, but the positive thoughts about it are good. So it's a good direction to be going.
Awesome. So if you get a chance, I'd love the information on that hook, that thing you
I
were just
will.
talking about. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll send you an email and you can disperse it out. It's basically a device that screws into the bottom of thing like he's talking about. It actually doesn't screw into it. It actually clips into it. This is a very common particular strap that people use. But the difference is that this is secure because it goes through I guess stainless steel or whatever loop here, so it can't come off. That's the biggest thing. I've seen somebody drop a 300 millimeter overboard on a blue cypress trip, right? They hooked up a teleconverter. Has anybody ever hooked up a teleconverter and it didn't engage all the way, and thank God you saw it?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't engage all the way. They picked it up to start taking pictures, and they had the camera and the teleconverter, but the lens fell off.
Ouch.
A 300 f2.8. Oh my
Aye.
goodness. Yeah,
That
we never
hurts.
found it. I'm in there. I got in the water with my feet trying to feel it. I never could find it. I mean, it was gone. It's
Wow.
sad, but anyway,
Definitely.
much appreciate you guys, and keep up the great work, and we'll see you out
Wonderful.
there. I haven't been, let's see, any spots to share with you. Wakota Green Cay have been good. Dinner Island's been good. We're starting to turn the corner now, getting to the summer. Hopefully the birds will stay longer. The biggest thing is the water conservation situation. Water levels is what's affect the birds the most. Everybody agree?
Yeah,
So
definitely. So
that's what we'll be doing on Saturday. If anybody's interested, just reach out. Nancy gets first dibs. If it doesn't work, Nancy, then feel free to.
I just need
Offered.
to get in touch with those people, and I'll let you
Yeah,
know.
did she answer you? She answered me.
Not yet. I
Oh.
haven't. I was
Oh,
getting
okay.
ready for this event tonight,
Yeah.
so I didn't.
She answered you too. So,
Okay. I will
Okay.
do that.
Well,
All right, thanks,
everybody have a
Don.
great night. God bless. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Same. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to
Oh,
see
Ann
you.
was there. Ann's there.
I just noticed.
Watch the whole
Ann, is
thing.
that you?
Yeah, so Nance, I did